Imagine a woman living in Kyoto. She isn't wealthy. She isn't retired early. She doesn't own investment properties or spend her mornings checking stock prices. She lives in a modest apartment above a small bakery. Her salary would seem ordinary by almost any modern standard. Yet on the first evening of every month, after dinner is finished and the dishes are put away, she sits quietly at her kitchen table, opens a worn notebook whose pages have yellowed with age, and experiences something millions of people spend their entire lives chasing. Not more money, not higher income, not financial freedom, something far rarer. She feels financially secure. The notebook in front of her cost less than a cup of coffee. The pen she uses cost even less. There is no app involved, no dashboard, no subscription, no algorithm calculating projections in the background, just paper, ink, and 20 minutes of attention. For more than a century, millions of Japanese households have practiced a ritual called kakebo. Hidden inside this deceptively simple habit is a truth that modern finance has spent decades encouraging you to forget. The feeling of wealth does not come from how much money you have. It comes from how clearly you understand your relationship with it. By the end of this video, you'll be able to start that relationship from scratch, using nothing more than a notebook and a pen. No spreadsheets, no complicated budgeting systems, no financial guru selling a course. Just a method so simple, it almost feels too small to matter, and that's exactly why it works. Before we explore kakebo itself, we need to examine one of the most successful illusions ever sold to the human brain. The illusion is convenience. Specifically, the belief that making spending easier somehow means we're becoming better at managing money. Think about how money moves today. A tap of a phone, a swipe of a card, a single click online. Purchases happen so quickly that many people barely register them. Money disappears without ever feeling real. And that is not an accident. Researchers have spent years studying what happens inside the brain during financial decisions. One of the most fascinating discoveries emerged from studies examining the difference between paying with cash and paying electronically. When people use credit cards or digital payments, the brain often experiences the reward of obtaining something before it fully processes the cost of losing money. The pleasure arrives immediately. The pain arrives later, sometimes weeks later, sometimes not at all. But cash changes the equation. Cash forces the brain to witness the transaction in real time. You see the money leave your hand. You feel the bills becoming fewer. You experience a small moment of friction. And that friction is incredibly important because friction creates awareness. Modern technology has spent billions of dollars eliminating every obstacle between desire and purchase. Kakeibo does the opposite. It intentionally reintroduces awareness, and awareness changes everything. The story begins in 1904 with a woman named Hani Motoko, Japan's first female journalist. Long before behavioral economics became an academic discipline, she noticed something surprisingly simple. People who wrote down their spending behaved differently from people who didn't. Not because they were smarter, not because they earned more, because writing changes attention. Today, neuroscience offers a clearer explanation for what she intuitively understood more than a century ago. When you write by hand, your brain activates networks associated with memory, sensory processing, reflection, and emotional engagement. Handwriting forces information to slow down. It requires participation. Typing records information. Writing experiences it. This is why Kakeibo is not really a budgeting system. It is a mindfulness practice disguised as a financial habit. Most people think budgeting is about numbers. Income minus expenses equals savings. Track everything. Optimize everything. Automate everything. Kakeibo begins somewhere completely different. It begins with questions. Every month, practitioners sit down and answer 4 deceptively simple questions. How much money do I have available? How much would I like to save? How much am I actually spending? How can I improve? That's it. No complicated formulas. No financial jargon. No color-coded spreadsheets. 4 questions. 1 notebook. 20 minutes. And yet those questions accomplish something extraordinary. They transform money from a background process into a conscious conversation. Most people never truly see their spending habits. Purchases happen automatically. Subscriptions renew automatically. Bills leave automatically. Life becomes financial autopilot. Kakeibo interrupts the autopilot, not with guilt, not with restriction, with awareness. And awareness has a strange effect on human behavior. The moment we truly see something, we begin changing it, not because someone told us to, because we want to. This is why many long-term practitioners report spending significantly less over time without feeling deprived. The goal is not self-denial. The goal is alignment, to spend intentionally instead of impulsively, to choose rather than react. And this is where the second part of the Japanese approach enters the picture: cash. In many households practicing traditional kakebo, discretionary spending is withdrawn as physical money at the beginning of the month. The cash is then divided into simple categories: needs, wants, culture, and unexpected expenses. Each category receives its own envelope. At first glance, this seems almost primitive in a world of digital banking and mobile payments. But that simplicity is precisely the point. An envelope creates a visible boundary, a boundary your nervous system can understand instantly. When the envelope becomes thinner, you notice. When it empties, you stop. No notifications required. No app required. No budgeting software required. Just reality. And reality is surprisingly effective. The average person can spend money digitally without feeling much emotional resistance. But counting bills before a purchase forces a brief pause. A few seconds, that's all. Yet those few seconds often become the difference between a deliberate purchase and an impulsive one. Not because the item suddenly becomes unaffordable, because the decision becomes conscious. The pause creates space, and space creates choice. But beneath kakebo and beneath cash envelopes lies something even deeper: a philosophy, a worldview, a radically different definition of wealth. In Japanese thought, there is a concept called Chisoku. The phrase is often translated as knowing what is enough, not having enough. Knowing enough. The distinction changes everything. Modern consumer culture teaches that satisfaction exists one purchase away: a larger house, a newer phone, a better car, a higher income, a future version of life that finally feels complete. But the finish line keeps moving, and so does the anxiety. Chisoku proposes a different possibility. What if wealth is not the accumulation of more? What if wealth is the ability to recognize what already exists? This idea emerged during periods when resources were limited, yet remarkably, it survived even after prosperity arrived, because its value was never economic, it was psychological. The human brain is not designed to experience lasting satisfaction through endless acquisition. It quickly adapts. What once felt extraordinary soon becomes normal. Then, the search begins again. More, better next. But when attention shifts toward appreciation instead of accumulation, something unexpected happens. The feeling of scarcity begins to fade, not because circumstances changed, because perception changed. And perception is where financial peace begins. The woman in Kyoto does not open her notebook every month to discover what she lacks. She opens it to understand what she values. The notebook is not tracking money, it is tracking meaning. Every purchase becomes a clue. Every expense becomes a reflection. Every month becomes a conversation between intention and reality. Over time, that conversation creates something far more powerful than discipline. It creates identity, and identity is where lasting behavior changes lives. Someone who follows rules eventually becomes exhausted. Someone who changes identity behaves differently, without effort. There is a profound difference between saying, "I need to spend less," and saying, "I am someone who spends with purpose." One is a temporary instruction, the other becomes part of who you are. That distinction may be the most valuable lesson Kakeibo has to offer. Because financial transformation rarely begins with money, it begins with attention. So tonight, don't wait for next month. Don't wait for a promotion. Don't wait until life feels more organized. Find a notebook, Find a pen. Sit somewhere quiet. Write today's date. Then answer 4 simple questions. How much do I have? How much do I want to save? How much am I spending? How can I improve? That's where the ritual begins. Not with perfection, not with expertise, with awareness. Because 20 years from now, you probably won't remember the exact amount you saved this month, but you may remember the evening you stopped treating money as something that happened to you and started treating it as something you understood. And understanding, more than income, may be the closest thing financial peace has ever had to a secret.